Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path of recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Hey, good morning, Glenn, and good morning, my friend Paul.
Paul is back.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you back, man.
Yeah, this is all good stuff. Happy to be back at the coffee shop. Got a double tall with extra cream, extra sugar. I think I'm going back up for a shot of it.
Four creams, four sugars, man.
And a little espresso. So how you doing? Right.
My dad called that cookie batter.
Yeah, right. There you go.
That's awesome.
Cookie in a jar.
You got great muffins, too.
Yeah. So a couple quick things here. We got Paul back. And for those that are just kind of joining us on calendar, do yourself a favor and go back and listen to the first session that we had Paul on. It was
Paul's story.
Yeah, Paul's story, and it was really it was kind of part one. I mean, we had to have him back for part two, and we'll certainly bring him back for part 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Just because I just took so much away from that story, so much away from. And gave me practical things that I needed to be thinking about leaving this podcast. So I hope it touches you the same way, the listener. And in the conclusion of that, Paul made a statement, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but there's so much more about this than the not drinking, right? And and boy, I'm learning that, but you gave me a thirst to learn it even more.
Nice.
It's just good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I pulled out of Paul's story, and we'll probably put it as a title, is, quote unquote, I cannot do this any longer. Right. So, really dove in and found a solution. And one of the things that, as I'm sitting here next to Paul, and boy, as I said, he would have been great having on live stream. Just because he didn't open his big book once, but and we'll throw pictures up on Instagram and on Twitter and on our website. But his book is very well used, and not just on the outside, so he doesn't just carry it around, but on the inside, it's very well used too. And
I'm guessing he's had that recovered because the pages are certainly worn.
It was all busted up, and Myers Raymer, Chris Raymer's brother, does rebinds big books, and he did it for me and did a spectacular job. I was without it for a couple of weeks, and I felt naked.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's awesome,
man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I want to share something with you real fast, Glenn. I got a friend in the program who shoots out.
Wait. You have a friend?
Just one.
All right, cool.
I got a friend in the program who shoots me out little reminders and every day. And this comes from Paul. Paul talks a lot about the first 164 pages. That is the solution. That is the program. And those are our marching orders. But the stories in the back also are just have some real gems in there. And if I could, I'm reading. I'm not quoting off the top of my head like Paul. I'm not that impressive. But here's from page 337 of the big book, and it says, "So here I am, sober, successful, serene. Just a few of the gifts of the program for surrendering, suiting up, and showing up for life every day. Good days and bad days. Reality is a wild ride, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. I don't question how this program works. I trust in my God, stay involved in AA, service, go to lots of meetings, work with others, and practice the principles of the steps to the best of my willingness each day. I don't know which of these keeps me sober, and I'm not about to try and find out. It has worked for quite a few days now, so I think I'll try it again tomorrow."
Like it.
Love that, right?
Awesome.
Nice, man. So, frankly, as I look at my program, and I like to say I do 23 things a day, a week, a month to stay sober, and I think I'm doing okay. But one of the things I recognize from just listening and watching Paul during his story is, and I use the R word, relentless. And he woke me up a little bit. He challenged me, just as I'm watching him as he studies the program. I realized inside it woke me up that I have an opportunity to sharpen the pencil myself, right? And to get better and to study harder and with the guys that I work with, be more relentless with them on being a focused big book study. So, our session today, not sure the title yet. I'm sure we'll figure it out by the end. But Paul, we'd really like to dig in deeper on the study part of it. I mean, we go to big book meetings where we gently kick it around the room and read the stories, and we read the first 164 pages. But as I look at the semi-smirk on your face, that's not going to cut it.
That
right?
might not be right.
That's just not going to cut it. I mean, that's like softball, right? So, as you said in your prior session, sharing your story, you talked about quitting forever. I think part of quitting forever is really becoming a student of the big book. So that's what we'd like to focus on today. And frankly, I'm in the student chair. I am looking forward to learning.
Yeah, you made a comment last time in that it's a textbook, and ergo you need a teacher. So with that, I'll shut up.
There's a lot of textbooks I've had in my career that I was looking for the Cliff Notes version, and maybe that's a good analogy on where I'm at. Right? Maybe I've looked at I've totally read the 164 pages numerous times. Right? But I can't wait for folks to look at what my big book doesn't look like that. Right? So maybe I have taken the Cliff Notes version many times of sorts. So, Paul, really looking forward to you just, sharing some more insights, experience, strength, and hope on digging in deeper.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And I appreciate having me back. Yeah, one of the things I heard in the rooms, we have so many phrases and little cliches and all kinds of little feel good things all hung up around the rooms. But someone said something to me one time. I've never seen it written on anything in a room. It said, "There's a difference between ordinary recovery and extraordinary recovery." Ordinary recovery, I just didn't drink today. It's great. Neither did my dog. Who cares? This book talks to me.
That was funny right there.
It makes a promise to us.
That's the title. Neither did my dog.
Neither did my dog.
It makes a promise to us. It says that we have a design for living that really works. Okay, and it talks about specifically about changing our lives. This is there's so much more to this thing. When I start to apply the principles of this program, and the principles is a word that they used interchangeably with the steps. So when I apply these steps or the principles in my life changed. And I start to look at that in a different way when I start to explore 12-step programs. And if you want to see if the 12-step program of AA works, go and Google 12-step programs and see how many are out there. Because depending on what link you click on, you're going to see anywhere between dozens and hundreds. Okay? And you click on any of those blue links, you know what you're going to find? You're going to see the same 12 steps that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everybody out there stole them from us. And the reason they did is because they work. And we're already told that. The secret's already there. It's in the 12th step. It says, having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps, not a result, one of many. It's saying that's why we do it. It says we try to carry this to other people and practice these principles in all our affairs. Every single area of my life that I apply 12 steps to gets better, period. Now you go out and look at all these other programs that are out there. We have AA, we have CA, we have DDA, EA, FA, GA, HA. Literally go down the list. Okay, and every single one of these people who have these afflictions or addictions or whatever they have going on are working a 12-step program of recovery, and it works. There are millions and millions and millions of people out there getting better because of this. Mm-hmm. So therefore, if that's all true, and I can transform my life, and like I said last time, transformed people can transform people. And I love that I'm able to use the information in this book to help another man or woman save their life. Why wouldn't I? So we have all these steps that are outlined throughout our book. And then it's like, how do I carry this message? How do I carry a message of hope to the alcoholic that still suffers? And that answer is for us in chapter 7. It's working with others. It tells us what to do. And it starts out by saying that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when everything else fails. That's first sentence in there. And when I learned that I can help someone else save their life, and I learned throughout that chapter that I'm going to get a lot out of this. This is going to help me. And you hear people say, well, it's going to help me a whole lot more than it helps you. Well, yes, it's true. But the way it helps me is by carrying a message of depth and weight. On page 164 in our book, it tells us some real important information. It says, primarily, well, you cannot carry a message that you don't have. Okay? It says, if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, how about this? How about shut up? Okay, how about sit down? I appreciate that you want to sponsor other people because you've been hanging around AA for a decade or more. But there are many people in AA that are not alcoholics. And I get pushback on that all the time. But it's absolutely true, and I learned this early on. I found I was at a convention, and there was a man standing up at the podium. There was 2,000 people in this room, and he's sitting there talking about his story. And he's going on and on. He's saying, I met my wife, and we went to college together, and we used to drink together all the time. And remember that, honey? And everyone's laughing, and she's sitting down in the front row and having a good time. And he goes, my alcoholism, got to a point where it started to destroy my marriage. And I came home one day, and my wife said to me, if you come home drunk one more time, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to take your money, and you will never see us again. And this guy says, whoa. He goes, I think she's serious this time. I've heard this out of her mouth before, but this time, the look. She gave me the look, and I knew she was serious. So I thought, I don't want to lose my wife. I don't want to lose my kids. I don't want to lose all my stuff. I like those things. So I'm going to not drink anymore, and I'm going to go to AA. So this guy wanders into an AA room, and he happens to walk into the right meeting. It's a topic of discussion meeting, so we can vomit his shit all over the table. And he tells us all about his sad story with his wife and his history and all this stuff. He says, I'm not going to drink anymore. And he stops, okay? 20 years later, he's speaking up at a podium in front of 2,000 people. He hasn't worked a single step. He never talks about the steps. He never talks about a higher power. He never talks about the big book. He never talks about anything except the threat that resonated with him, and he put down the drink. Is he an alcoholic? Well, I don't know, but it doesn't sound like it to me, because my book says no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. God couldn't would if he were sought. And in order for me to do those things, I need to take some steps. I have to put a program of action into place. Because here's what I heard that day. And I'm sitting in the back of this room, and I'm watching this guy, and everyone's standing up and cheering and clapping and standing ovation at the end of this thing. And I'm thinking this. I came home to the same thing one day. And my wife said to me, if you come home drunk one more time, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to take all your money. I'm going to take all your shit, and you will never see us again. You know what my mind said?
See you later.
See you later. I can find another wife. Man. I can make more kids. I know how to make money. This is not important to me.
Absolutely.
I need more than that. If no human power could relieve our alcoholism, why are we putting our faith in humans? And if I am taking my entire trust and I'm putting it in my new higher power, which is my sponsor, or I'm putting into my new higher power, this group, I might be in trouble. And when is that going to happen? How about the meetings? The meetings keep me sober. We got into this place where it's like, if I go to enough meetings, I'll stay sober. Okay? Imagine this. Think about this. What if something unimaginable happened? Something that's never happened before in any person alive that you know of, any of their days. Let's say something really, really horrible set in. Let's call it a pandemic. Okay? And let's say that the churches are closed and the AA clubs are closed and the meetings are closed and you can't go to a meeting.
You're just crazy talk right now.
That'll never happen, man.
That'll never happen.
Come on, Paul.
Yeah. And do you know how many people have relapsed and died over the past 18 months? Sure. And you know what I hear time and time and time again? I couldn't go to my meetings. I couldn't hang out with my people. That was my higher power. Well, wait a minute. My book tells me something different. My book says no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. God couldn't would if he were sought. If that's true, I need to seek God. And if I have a higher power in my life that can get me through anything, an omnipotent higher power, all powerful, then I'm safe. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to have a bad day or a bad week. You know, that 2 weeks to bend the curve or whatever the hell it was, when that turned to 18 months later, and you got people that are going out of their minds and we're doing the things that we do, we isolate. I'm alone. That Zoom shit isn't working for me anymore, okay? The novelty wore off about 2 weeks after it was on. Okay, and I am not getting the same thing that I got in the in-person meetings. When they opened up the clubs again, man, people were going back in droves. You know, mass, 2 mass, 3 mass, fine. I want to be with my people. Mm-hmm. And that was so important because they lived with that, you know, and I get it. The social interaction is important. But, man, through this pandemic, I was safe. I was okay. I suffered like everybody else through a lot of it. You know, I miss my people, but I was never threatened. I never thought to pick up the drink or drug. It never crossed my mind. My God is powerful. I have a higher power today that I count on, and it didn't start like that. You know, I came in. I was the Catholic that was angry. You know, I was mad at God, and you know, I didn't believe in God anymore. I told my first sponsor that I'm mad at God. I don't believe in him. He says, you can't be mad at a God you don't believe in.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I was like, oh, God, what do you know?
Awesome.
So what I did was I had to recreate my understanding of a higher power. Mm-hmm. And our book talks about everything. It's crazy. On page 28 in there, it talks about what once was a flimsy reed became the loving and powerful hand of God. And that's where I got to. Coming out of Catholicism, I had 8 years of Catholic confinement. I was an altar boy. I did Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, all the little Catholic CCD things, everything else. But I was mad at God because shit happened in my life that I didn't agree with. God didn't come down and say, hey, man, what do you think about this? How about after your freshman year of college, I'm going to have you driving home with your girlfriend and a drunk driver's going to hit you. She's going to die at 18 years old, and you're going to get all fucked up. You're going to be on the side of the road with 26 broken bones, and you're going to spend the next 2.5 months in a hospital, okay? Yeah, God, I don't think I want to do that. Well, too bad. Boom. All of a sudden, that's my reality, okay? What are you doing, God? You take this angel off of the earth who did nothing wrong, and you leave this scumbag, me, on the planet who goes away to school, and the first thing I start doing is abusing alcohol, drugs, and people. Okay? Why is that? What kind of God allows that to happen? You know, several years later, my little brother, he can't handle life. He's taking drugs, and he sticks a gun in his mouth and blows his head off, and I walk in on that mess. And I'm saying, what kind of God allows this stuff to happen? Seriously, like what's going on? I'm out of that game. I want nothing to do with that God. And I walk into AA and it's God. You know, it's in all these steps. And I'm like, how do I equate those two things? And our book is beautiful, man. It talks about it says that all we need is a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And it made it all inclusive. Everyone joined the party. Everyone can come in now. My God might look different than your God. You know, what we are trying to do is seek. This is all about the journey. I had a guy in the house the other day. He comes up to me. He says, I got 52 days sober. I said, God bless you. I said, good job. And he goes, where are you at? And I said, I got a little bit more than that. He goes, where are you at? And I said, I just had 22 years. And he goes, wow, I wish I had that. I said, I'll trade you right now. I'll trade you right now.
I understand that.
Are you kidding me? The journey has been magnificent. Mm-hmm. I will take it again. I don't want to go through some of the shit I went through, but I'll tell you what, this growth experience that I have been entitled to as a result of working these steps has been incredible. Getting to meet you guys and work with other people, helping somebody out of a place that they think there is no help from. And this is what our big book talks about. It says, man, when you got this thing, when you have this message, when you know what you're talking about, and I see that drunk, and I'm not the guy at the meeting that says, keep coming back and throw a fucking business card at him and a phone number and say, I hope you keep coming back. I'm the guy that says, do you want to quit drinking forever? Mm-hmm. Do you? Because if you want help with that, I know what to do.
That is a challenging question.
Yeah, right.
Do you want to quit forever?
Right.
Because if you don't, I got nothing for you. Our book talks about that too. There are people that don't want this. There are people that wander into our rooms that aren't alcoholic. There are a lot of them. And that's why it's important for us to qualify them. It's what they did in the old days. Mm-hmm. They used to have a punch card. And they would come in and they would qualify the newcomer. And it says that the qualification is have them understand what you're up against. I walk into treatment centers all the time, and I work in the treatment centers and hospitals all over the area, and I walk in, I ask people all the same thing. I said, how many of you have been in AA before? And almost inevitably, every time, everyone's hand goes up. And my next question is always the same. I say, what are you doing here? Why are you here? What's going on? And the answer is almost always the same. You know what they say? AA didn't work. AA didn't work for me. I was like, oh, well, wait a minute. Hold on. AA worked for me. Let's talk about it. Let's find out what happened. And these are people that worked some of the steps. These are the people that thought that AA was going to meetings. These are people that thought that if they went out and told their spouses or their parents or their kids or whoever it was that they're sorry, thinking that was an amend, that everything would get better. They did nothing to grow their spiritual life. And then they go back to what the book talks about, the great panacea, is alcohol. And that was my cure. When I'm feeling this bad, I got to fix that. Mm-hmm. So this program is all about, you need to participate in your recovery. You need to know what you're up against, and you got to do something about it. Faith without works is dead. You can believe in a higher power all day long, but there is work to do. And when I started working these steps and I started doing this stuff, I started to understand something. My life was changing. And I know that's true. So now I can tell this new guy, I say, you know what? If you don't want to drink ever again, if you don't ever want to put another drink or drug in your body and you want to work with me, I'll jump down in that hole with you. I'll walk your ass out of there. I know the way out. I'm not going to throw a phone number down in there and say, good luck. Because that's what we're supposed to do, is carry a message of hope to the alcoholic that still suffers.
So wow, great stuff.
See, Mikey, that's where the word relentless
starts
to get a definition, right?
I'm starting to see it in play. So my question, I guess, is, you obviously didn't prepare for this coffee this morning by reading the first 164 for the first time and come in here and...
Or the Cliff Notes version.
Obviously, you have, over the years, you have studied it. And
hey, Mikey, I have to jump in.
Go ahead.
So all of those recitations, I love using big words. All those recitations never touched the big book. He never. His hand
was on it. I saw it.
Yeah, but he never looked at the table of contents to see what pages. So that's one thing that will continue. But let me, I'll bounce it back to you. But I wanted the listeners to know what was happening in the studio.
And it begs my question. How do I get to that hope? How do I get to that foundation? Because what I see in you is a real foundation. What I see in you is a message that there are multiple messages, but the one, it's all crammed in this 100. It's only 164 pages. It's not Harry Potter stacked up, 12 books. I don't know. I'm not a Harry Potter guy. I run away from my house when it's HP weekend. But Harry Potter's a big stack. This is simply 164 pages, and you're pulling all that out of 164 pages. You've built a foundation. My question is, how do you help the people that are joining us for coffee in their car this morning? What's your suggestion? Where do you take them to? What's their next step?
I think it's folks that go to one or the real aggressive folks that go to 2 big book meetings a week, right? And they're like, hey, I'm a student of the big book. I go to 2 big book meetings a week where we read the big book. What does that look like compared to being a student?
Okay, so first, Mike, what do we do? The first thing that I suggest people do is be the spearhead of your recovery. You are responsible for your recovery, okay? Not your sponsor. And I tell, like you said earlier, your last session, I tell guys that I work with, I say, listen, guys, I'll match your enthusiasm. I have already explained to you what the steps are, because that's my job. It tells us that in working with others. I'm going to tell you everything. This is what the steps look like. You need to know what you're up against. And then I need to know if you're willing to pick up this kit of spiritual tools it talks about and get busy. Okay, I will assist you in your recovery, but I can't do it for you. We say that at Trinity Sober Living all the time. We say, you know what, I will do it with you, but I can't do it for you. If I could do it for you, I'd go around all these clubs and I'd be anointing people sober, and you're all better and everything's good. I can't do that, and I tried. If I'm working harder at this than you are, I'm doing it wrong. So I tell people, get with someone that knows what they're talking about. Tell them that you want to learn the information as it's covered in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. In the forward to the second edition in there, it talks about the old days, and it talks about the success rates that they had. It said 50% 75% of the people then working the program precisely the way it's laid out in the book recovered. 25% after a drink or a relapse. That's 75% of the people that are getting exposed to this stuff back then were recovered. Now, we don't have that today. You go to the treatment centers, you go to any of these halfway houses, and you hear percentages that are always single digit and usually in the mid to low single digits about your chances of staying sober. That's a fucking embarrassment. That is
first
wrong.
Treatment center in Laguna Beach, on the website, so you got to believe it because it was on the website, Paul.
Sure.
90% success rate.
Yes, so they twist the numbers around, they lie about it, and this is what they do. So they say that while these people are in my treatment center, they are staying sober.
That wasn't even true either.
So the 90%,
That's right.
Now it makes sense. Well, I'm in lockdown for 60 days. There's almost no chance that I can do it.
There's no open bar in the rehab.
But there's one guy who's trying to figure out how to make his oranges and apples and fruit into booze. So it's not 100%. But I'm talking about long-term recovery. So you get guys that are having long-term recovery and having success. The most popular time, that's a bad word, the most common time for people to relapse is in year one, obviously, right? Okay. You know when the second most common time to relapse is?
5 years.
5 to 7 years.
Yeah. That scares the snot out of me.
You know why?
Guess where I'm at.
Because you get complacent. Yep. It's like, I got it now, I'll take it from here. And you stop doing all the stuff that you used to do.
Got this.
And yeah, I've got it. And that our book says that we got to do this for a lifetime. It tells us that in here, okay? And it tells us, again, in the beginning, to get back to your question, it says that on page 17, it says, we have found a way out in which we can absolutely agree. Everybody back then was doing the same thing. You couldn't go to one club and say, I don't like the way this guy wanted to sponsor me. How would you sponsor me? And they go, I'm doing the same shit he's gonna do, right. But I'm gonna get you up a little earlier. Right. They all agreed on the message, okay? And so they had success rates that were off the charts. Now we've got guys that say, well, if you don't like him, go over there. He's a little bit easier. This guy, he'll get you through the step a month club. The step a month club, So I'm not stupid. I look at 12 steps, like 12 months. It's like a year. I'm gonna start feeling better a year from now. I'm gonna fucking die if I don't get this thing down and get it down soon. They talk about having to take a long time. It's not true. Read the book, please. Look at the book. Bill Wilson went to Akron, Ohio on a business trip, 6 months sober, and met up with Dr. Bob. Okay, he gave Dr. Bob the information. He had a few failures along the way, but ultimately, June 10th, 1935, Dr. Bob came home after making his amends, and that's the first day of Alcoholics Anonymous. 16 days later, they're at Akron Hospital dealing with this drunk over there who's in and out, Bill Dotson, okay? Bill Dotson, Bill and Bob are carrying the message to him. He went home never to drink again. He went home a free man, okay? Bill Wilson was 6 months sober. Dr. Bob was 18 days sober when he carried this message of hope to 3 guys. These 3 guys stayed sober forever. So why are we telling people that you can't do this for a year and you can't do that for a year and you can't chair a meeting for a year and you can't move for a year and don't change a job for a year and don't get in a relationship for a year and all that other stuff? Our book doesn't tell us that. None of it. It says that what we should be doing is going out and working with enthusiasm and getting after this thing. We have a chapter in here called Into Action, okay? It's an important chapter. It covers steps 5 through 11. And you go in there and you read this thing, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, now my life is starting to change. And it can happen relatively quickly, If you're doing this stuff the way it's laid out in the book, a lot of people, they get to this magic 6 and 7 step, and they're like, "Wow, shit! There's not a lot about it in the book." I turn over page 76, and there's one paragraph on 6 and one paragraph on 7, and I don't know what else to do, and I'm a sponsor, and I'm supposed to look smart. So here's what I'm going to do: I'm going to go get this book out of the library called "Drop the Rock," and I'm going to drop that on my sponsee, and I'm going to tell him to read that.
I've actually done that.
Yeah, because now I look smart. Now I've made this information bigger. What they don't know, because they've never had it explained to me, as I did not, okay, was that steps 6 and 7 are thoroughly explained on pages 66 and 67. How cool is that? 6, 7.
Boy,
okay, and there's a little bit on page 68 also. And where is that in our book? That's while you're doing your 4th step. Why would they introduce steps 6 and 7 during your 4th step? It's because they were smart. These people knew what they were talking about when they put this stuff together, the first 100. They understood something. When we're doing our fourth step, we're getting to this fourth column where it talks about character defects, and it talks about 4 of them. I know you can have 100 or dozens or dozen hundreds, but it talks about where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. They have 4 umbrellas that we put as our character defects because I can work with 4. I understand that. If I boil a lot of my character defects down, they boil down to fear. Anyway, but it talks about that, and then it goes on to say, hey, you know what? We understand something. When you're looking at your character defects, and you go, oh, shit. I didn't know I was afraid of everyone. I didn't think I was afraid of anyone or anything. I do a fears inventory, and I find out I'm afraid of everyone and everything. That's a bad day for me. And then right there after the next page, it says, you know what? Here's a fear prayer. Here's what we can do for that. We can help you get through this. We want you to feel better because we understand that character defect is resonating with you right now because you just wrote it down. And it's saying, here's what you do. We pray about it. Wow. So 6th step has been identified. And the 7th step prayer, we ask for help. Throughout this book, it says we ask, we ask, we ask. They're always talking about prayer. They always talk about you turn over to your higher power and you say, hey, listen, I'm going to ask you for some help. I'm not calling my sponsor. My sponsor might not be able to help me with this. I tell all the guys I work with, I say, you go pray first, okay? You got to understand something. I don't have all your answers. No human power, right? I'm a human power. If you're counting on me for all your answers, I'm going to fail you. What's a human being's ultimate failure? How about death? You know, I know guys that were counting on their sponsor every single day. Call me every day. I call my sponsor every day and he died, man. I don't know what to do. What? What are you talking about? You know, I need to direct you to a higher power so that when I'm not available, it is. And I want you to grow that relationship and make it strong because when you have that with you, you can't help but get better. You will always, always, always know what to do. And it talks about this in our book. Our book's incredible, man. If you learn how to do this stuff, you will understand this differently. It talks about in there, it talks about what to do at night, what to do when we wake up in the morning, and what to do during the day. That covers 24 hours, okay? If I'm doing it this way, I can't screw it up. I just didn't know it was in there. No one ever told me that until someone introduced this information to me and explained it. I read it. I read it many times. I never understood what I was reading. So, yes. Long answer to your question, get someone that knows what they're talking about and have them help you. And
question for you. Did you need to jump in, Clem?
No, just one thing that really is just kind of bouncing around because there's a guy in one of our groups. He's got, I don't know, 3 or 4 months sober or whatever, right? He starts announcing in the room, and he had tried it before and he relapsed, and he starts announcing, hey, you know what? I'm available to sponsor. And he's on like step 2 or step 3, and I'm available to sponsor. And hey, Paul, I'm still learning, you know? So I go to my sponsor. I'm like, dude, hey, you know, should you work all the steps before you start sponsor people, you know? And he's like, I think you should work them twice. You know, I think you should really be good, right? And I've heard this guy say, hey, I don't need to work all the steps to sponsor people. You know, Bill W. didn't, right? And Dr. Bob didn't, right? So I'd love for you to touch on that a little bit. And what I heard you say, and I wrote it down, and I mean, I have to take a picture of my notes because by the time we're done, this thing's going to be covered. But you said you can't carry a message that you don't have, right? So, you know, can you talk about that a little bit? I think you can be a sober friend to people, but you can't be a lighthouse for somebody if you don't know where the rocks are.
Agree. Right? Agree completely. And Bill Wilson did work all the steps. They looked different back then because he worked the steps as Ebby Thatcher, his sponsor at the time, who came from the Oxford group, explained it to him. And it looked a little bit different back then. They had these things called tenets, Tenets, and they had 6 tenets, which Bill basically stole and bastardized into our 12 steps. He elaborated on me. He cut them up a little bit differently, and that's how we got the 12 steps that we have today. But Bill did work the steps. He worked them very quickly. There's some evidence that says that he worked them in a couple of days. So he was able to do that. Dr. Bob also worked all the steps. Dr. Bob knew what Bill did when Bill and Bob met the first time at Henrietta Cyberlink's house. They went over there and Bill explained to him everything that he had done. It wasn't as refined as it is today, but he said, hey man, these are the things that I did. Maybe you should try it too. Dr. Bob stayed drunk for years. Why? He refused to make his amends. He didn't go out there. He didn't want to damage his stature in the community, he talks about in Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Yep. He said he didn't want to, the little bit of business I have left in my family, I don't want to embarrass him, and I don't want to lose my position here. He was ashamed, and he didn't want to go out and make his amends. When he finally did, June 10th, 1935, we have AA. Back to your question about a new guy. You haven't worked the steps. You don't need to contact your sponsor for that answer. You need to go up to that guy and take him outside and tell him, hey, listen, man, you know what? You need to carry a message of hope, and right now you don't have one. Okay, it's irresponsible for you to do that. It is. It talks about we are on a life and death mission. It talks about that when we're going through our fifth step. You need to get with someone that knows what they're talking about. There are too many people out there that are doing that. Okay, what qualifies you to be a teacher in this university when you don't know what you're talking about?
I think in that case, ego.
I'm sorry?
I think in that case, his ego was telling him that, hey, I want to be a sponsor at.
Absolutely. And because we're not governed,
dangerous, I think.
It is dangerous. And that kind of guy, I'd follow that guy around and talk to the guys he's thinking he's going to sponsor, because it's irresponsible. And again, life and death mission. People could die because of lack of information or the wrong information. And it's important for us to be able to understand what we can and cannot do. So, and we hear this, and it's not okay. It's okay to stand up in a meeting and say something. It's not comfortable. I get that, but it's the right thing to do. You need to say, hey, are you doing this or not? I study, and I am in this book 100%. Okay, I am not ashamed of this. I'm not embarrassed about this. I will tell everyone and anyone that I am in recovery. I want to do my job that I'm supposed to do as it's outlined in the book. If I don't know what I'm talking about, I can't do it. I started out by telling you guys last session, if you can't reconcile what I'm saying with this book, don't believe me. Don't listen to it. Okay, it's just my opinion. That's what all the stories are in the back. It's a bunch of people's opinions. It may or may not resonate with you. This stuff works. We know that it works. And if you're getting with people that don't know what they're talking about, get rid of them. It's okay to fire a sponsor. I've been fired by fucking text message before. Get out of here, fucking. I don't care. I want you to get. So if you can figure out another way to do it, that's fine. This is the only thing I know, and I know it works.
That is so true. My brain asked the question, what are my options when I came to my point of pain, where I felt I couldn't do this anymore. Two things. First of all, I couldn't embrace the fact, and we'll talk about this again at another coffee, I couldn't embrace the fact that I couldn't drink ever. No three evers for me. Just keep me sober today. But I investigated what are my options out here for quitting drinking, and it kept coming back. The only place I could see where it was working was sitting across the table from another alcoholic saying, I've got sobriety. This is how I did it. But two things before we wrap up. A lot of energy coming out of you, right? A lot of energy. And
it's that R word. Relentless.
I thought it was the C word, caffeine.
A lot of people just get scared.
I don't see him drinking a lot of caffeine.
Right. But a lot of energy, and to me, sometimes that relates to this must take a lot of work. To get where you're at right now. I want to take a magic pill and get there, right? And I'm certain that some of our listeners might say, well, I can't achieve quoting page 86 of the big book. I can't achieve that in my realm of reality right now. What do you tell those people? How can you move them down the path? And if I could just throw one word out there, and I heard you say the word willingness, or willing to multiple times. I guess what is the next step for people?
So, great question. And I didn't talk like this when I first got into recovery. I learned this stuff because I found out, A, it worked, and B, that it's possible, and it changed my life. And when I made a commitment to doing this thing, it's no different than my drinking and drugging. It really isn't. I was all in on drinking and drugging. There was no gray area. I might have a little bit. I am going out to get plowed, and it's every single day. It might not start out that way, but usually finish that way. So when I got into recovery, I did it the same way. And I made this my purpose because it's life-saving and life-altering. And that is so important that I can help somebody else who's dying of untreated alcoholism, give them a little glimmer of hope That is some powerful stuff. So if you're not comfortable or happy with your recovery, how about recommitting to it? How about getting into a program where you're not just reading the big book, the question that you asked earlier,
but
Glenn.
Paul, I go to a big book meeting every week.
Yeah, if you're going to a meeting,
they actually go around and everybody reads a couple lines.
And then they give you their opinion, and
what I love best is when they change the words of the big book.
Oh, don't get me started. And and I love that they're reading the stories in the back of the book, and we're on page 560. I'm like, well, that's good, but that part of the book are people's experience. It may or may not align with yours, and it's important for the people to understand they're walking into a big book study that you're studying the big book. By definition, you should be. And if you don't have a teacher up there, my beautiful wife is a teacher, then they wouldn't know what to do. If I'm a chemistry professor and I walked into a college and I say, welcome students, happy first day of class. Here's the book for chemistry. There'll be a final exam in 6 months. Good luck. And I walk out, how are you going to do in that class? You can read the book, but if you don't have some instruction or a guide or someone to help you through it, how are you going to get it done? And it's not hard. So to do this thing, to be able to sponsor, people go, oh God, you're sponsoring, 18, 19 people. Yeah, how do you have the time to do it? Well, here's one way I have the time. The first thing I tell everyone I sponsor is this: don't call me every day. Okay? If you need to talk to me, call me. If it's important, text me. If it's super important, text me with, I need you right fucking now. I know what that means. I will walk out of a meeting for that text.
911.
Okay? But if you're just calling me to shoot the shit, I got a life, I got a business, I got stuff to do. Taking someone through the steps does not have to take a long time. We learned that in the book. We know that, okay? People get bogged down with the fourth step. Oh my God, it's the hardest thing to do. I filled whole notebooks and drained pens and all shit. It's a bunch of bullshit, okay? You don't have to do it. You don't need to convince me you have a resentment. I tell guys when they're working their fourth step that first. I said, listen, let's start out with this. I believe you. Okay? You don't need to convince me with words, and a lot of them, that your father was an alcoholic. Okay, if you have resentment against your father because he's an alcoholic, in column 2 where it says, why were we angry? You can write down this word, alcoholic. Okay, if I need the backstory on that for some reason, I'll bet you can fill in all the blanks. And now what I've allowed you to do is move on. What else you got a resentment against? Mm-hmm. Your resentment column should be quick, man. 1, 2, 3 words, maybe a sentence, but that's it. If you can't summarize your resentment in that much and you're getting into the storyline, you're doing it wrong. And what you're doing is you're gonna keep yourself from finishing because it's too much. Sure. You come into this thing with decades and decades and decades of drinking and bad behavior and drug addiction. The fourth step can be daunting. But if we simplify it like it talks about in the book, let's keep going into action. Let's keep you moving. Right. I want you better. We can always go back and revisit it. You talk about working the steps multiple times. You're right. And here's how we know. Because it tells us this in the book. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are conclusions of the heart and the mind. Okay? When I sat in the car in that parking lot and I asked a God I didn't believe in for help, help came. I just didn't know it. I was too damn stupid to understand it. Okay? I learned about that 3 years later, when I'm losing my family, I'm going through a divorce, my kids aren't talking to me, I'm losing my business, I owe a lot of money to a lot of people, and the people that owe me money aren't giving me anything. And I'm up at my sponsors, and I'm like, hey man, I got to talk to you, I got some shit going on. And he goes, what's going on? I said, well, all this stuff, and and he's a therapist, so he's sitting there going, how does that make you feel? And I said, it makes me feel like shit. Are you listening to me?
Pissed off, man.
And I go, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? He goes, wow. He goes, you're going through a divorce. He goes, you're gonna have to tell your wife, that you love her and you take care of all the kids and everything, and you have to go get a job, put together a resume. You're college educated, you can do that. And I get pissed off. I said, what are you talking about? You're my sponsor. Aren't you supposed to fix these things? And he's like, oh, no. He goes, I am not. He goes, I am here to assist you in your journey. And I get pissed off and I stand up and I start storming out of that room. And he goes, get your ass over here and sit down. And I say, what do you want? He said, let me ask you a question. You came into my office many, many years ago, and you said that you were ready to quit drinking for good and for keeps and for all. Do you remember that? I said, yeah, I do. He goes, I asked you a couple of questions that day, and here's one of them. I said, if I could tell you how to never put another drink or drug in your body ever again, what would that be worth to you? He goes, you remember that? I go, no, I don't. He goes, I do. He goes, you remember your answer? I said, no. He goes, I do. He goes, you told me you would give me everything you've got. And you told me you had a big, tall pile. You were very proud of yourself. You had a whole lot of stuff. Okay? And then you told me that you could do that anytime you wanted, that you had no idea how to stay clean and sober. He goes, today, you know how to stay clean and sober. Congratulations. You have now lost your other shit, and you know how to get it back. Go do it.
I love it. I love it.
That's great.
Can't thank you enough for having us again, or having you again. It's wow, good
it's
stuff.
Almost having us, right? I mean, that's underline the word relentless again, man, Paul.
And Paul, thanks so much.
Thanks,
you
man.
come back again?
Yes.
All right, beautiful.
Thank you.
All right,
guys.
thanks, man. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.